Welcome everybody to this May Developer Hangout from the Xero API team. Here in Wellington we've got myself, Ronan Quirk, and got Tony Rule from our API team, and also Adam Moore, who is at the coalface working with our developer team on feature improvement and enhancement. So today, if you just cut to the next slide, we'll run through what we've got on the agenda for today. We've got an all-star cast, so today's Hangout is going to be about 45 minutes long. We've got Rod Drury, our CEO from Xero, here to talk about the state of the add-on ecosystem. We've been getting a lot of questions about, about the commercial landscape for the add-on ecosystem, and so we'd love to have a little chat with Rod and ask him some questions on that. And Tony's going to give us an update on some of the functionality we've recently released and what's on the roadmap as well, which is also always close to everybody's hearts. And then we've got Roddy James over in Melbourne, who's going to be keeping an eye on the questions. And so just ping anything into the comments window underneath the video screen that you can see now, and just feel free to ask any questions, whether it's a question for Rod or it's about the future roadmap for the API, things like that, or even if you've got a question about something you're trying to do with the API, and we can maybe at the end as well. Awesome. So I guess first of all then, hey Rod, how's it going?
Good, very good.
Cool. So you're in our Hawke's Bay beach office?
Not the beach, rainy Hawke's Bay day, east coast of New Zealand.
Cool. So Rod, just before we dive into the add-ons and ecosystem and everything like that, I just want to get your impression, because you're not just CEO, you're also a founder, so you've been here from day one at Xero. And this idea of an API and applications that interface with an accounting application has been with us from day one, hasn't it?
Yeah, When we thought about this, we realised there was hundreds of bits of accounting software out there, whether it be a church subscription management or a golf course system or a retail point of sale. And what we saw happening on the cloud is those vertical apps are splitting out, and it's really exciting. That's exactly what we've seen happen. So what we believe is in a commodity general ledger, and as we say to all of our partners, you guys don't have to build that anymore. You can just build your vertical line of business application on top of that investment that we've done. And what I really love about this is it means if you're doing a platform play like Xero, that's a $250 million investment. It's very expensive to build one of these massive platforms. You're not just building the small business side. You've got to build the accountant side. You've got to build the API, all of those things, and you have to also have the resources to sell to millions of customers. What I really love about it is that we've got now over 300 partners in the ecosystem that can leverage the channel that we've developed and build these really cool apps now. And I've just in the last in the last day I've been to events with 4 of our add-on partners, and in mature markets like New Zealand, it's all about the add-ons. It's actually how do we make this really relevant to businesses. So yesterday we did Figured and a Receipt Bank. Even a little place like Napier, we had 95 accountants there, which was just awesome. This morning we did a property one with an accounting partner with Pocket Rent and released, and just great feedback from those customers.
Yeah. So what's our role in terms of helping these developers along in terms of getting their add-ons to market? We've put a lot of investment in building our own sales channel. Is that something that they can piggyback on? Where does the line do you see?
Yeah, so we'd much rather you guys just leverage the work that we do, spend money on building great applications, and it's really cool. Most of the add-on partners that I see are kind of almost exclusively working with us and going to our events. The Accountex conference we just did in the UK, where we had the show within a show, was just amazing. So working together, I think it's a really strong value proposition for the market. And at those events, like those shows within a shows or XeroCons, should give you your sales pipeline for the year. So one of the things that we'll continue to do, and we're investing even more in this, is putting more and more people that can connect to our marketing resources so you guys can fish off the channels that we've been building. And we just announced we're at over 300,000 customers now. We're the #1 accounting software, just pure accounting in New Zealand. We have 20% plus market share, which just hasn't happened before. In Australia and the UK, we're now the leading online accounting provider. So it's pretty fertile ground.
Cool. So one question, Rod, I get asked quite a bit on the commercial side of things is, how do you price your add-on? Should you be less per month than Xero? Should you be more? Should you be like a quarter off? What's your thoughts on that? Hey Rod, sorry, I don't know if you...
Yeah, so what I keep saying to all of our partners and our accounting partners is don't expect all of the add-ons are going to be sort of 50. Yeah, I heard that. So what I say to most of our partners is don't expect that all the add-ons are going to be $50. We are we're building a business with massive investment for millions of customers. So I think the way that I'd think about pricing add-ons is think about what's your most realistic, what's your realistic market share. If you're building a business with a support infrastructure and developers for 2,000 to 3,000 customers, and lots of these vertical applications will be of that size, what's your annual revenue going to be? And then you can sort of work it through costs, and you start to arrive at price through that. So I think it's entirely reasonable that we'll see, $100 a month, $4.99 a month for if you're kind of getting in where ERP software costs, $100,000 to get started. Having more expensive add-ons does absolutely make sense. We'll keep educating the market that we are commoditizing for millions, so we can be at that kind of $29, $50 a month price point. And some add-ons may choose to get there, but I think there'll be a whole lot of other add-ons that can be more expensive because you're saving customers, 10 to 20 grand a year. I think it's also when you're starting off, don't be worried too much about price. What you might do is have introductory pricing for the first year or two while you're getting going, and you can always grandfather that pricing. And so you may sort of do introductory pricing for the first year or two, and then once you get to a bit of scale, once your product gets up to a point where you're beginning, where the market gets really happy with it, then you can go and say, okay, well now the new price for all new customers is this, because it is important to sort of show those revenue numbers in those first few years of the business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So that leads on to another question about vertical and niche opportunities. People keep asking me, what should I be thinking about? Should I be, where should I be building apps? But I mean, just the landscape is just so broad. It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be looking at all when you think about these things, it's not just about the technology opportunities. Where are the bits where people pay, and where are there large networks of users? So, like when you go to the vet or the doctor, there's a whole lot of generic businesses doing things the same, and there's great line of business applications that you see right there. One that we've sort of talked about to a few people, one that's glaringly missing in the ecosystem at the moment is high volume billing. We don't really want to have more than 1,000 invoices a month through Xero. That's not our design point. So somebody building, an invoicing engine that can do, 5 to 10,000 or more invoices, treat that like a subsidiary ledger, and pass in the daily journals. For things like alarm monitoring companies or small ISPs. I think there's a lot of opportunities in those sort of spaces. But I think looking for these network opportunities, and just as you're around buying stuff and seeing stuff, I think you'll see them. There's going to be thousands of apps. The other area which I think is super interesting now is now we're getting to scale in New Zealand with so much market share. What's happening is we're aggregating, over 100,000 small businesses now. So large businesses are starting to connect in as well. So supply chain applications where you're leveraging that we have a large community of users and helping large businesses, talk through their billing portals or through, purchase orders and all that sort of stuff to do that whole electronic data interchange between large and small businesses is a really interesting space.
Cool. So one of our questions that came in is from Marcus, and I believe he might be in Australia. He's asking about this idea of the cloud integrator space, and we're seeing some inroads being made in that in Australia. Do you want to talk about where you see them fitting into this picture?
Yeah, so cloud integrators make sense. It's the new kind of value-added reseller. What we've got to do is work out the right places where they can monetize. Because for the SaaS provider, when you're trying to provide commodity services, there's not a whole lot of margin there, and they have to sell a hell of a lot to make it worth their time. So I think it's the combination of these vertical add-ons. Like if you're going to put in a stock management system into a winery, they're going to spend 10, 20 grand of consulting time to get all of that working. So I think with the commodity accounting side, it's really hard to do that purely. But if you're attacking a vertical with an add-on partner, you're more likely to get right into those business processes of those vertical companies. And I think that's where we're going to see the cloud integration opportunities. We need to be in those market where there's sort of 5 to 20 grand plus of consulting services, so it makes it really, really worthwhile. Below that, what we've got to do with all of our products is to drive it to almost not needing that sort of consultancy, because that's the only way that you can really scale and be at this price point. Does that answer the question, Marcus? Let me know if I haven't.
Yeah. I think I'm not sure if everybody lost you for just the last second when you're talking about price point there, or it was just us. But I think we got most of it anyway. So just switching tracks a little bit. Our friend Alexander Cole from JetConvert had a question. It's a more general one about what sort of things make Xero so innovative, just on the back of the recognition from Forbes magazine recently. Straight off topic a little bit, but in some ways not really.
Yeah, so I mean, the big story there is the PR that we get from it. So there is a mathematical formula which allowed us to win that award. It was just a real gift for us. So regardless of how all of that's calculated, it's just a massive endorsement for what we're doing as an ecosystem. So obviously what we're trying to do is a PR attached to Intuit. People in the US just don't know about Xero and the power of the ecosystem. So obviously we're using that to continue to keep that rolling, keep the message going, the whole lot of sort of PR strategies around all of that sort of stuff. I think what makes us innovative, I think, is that our DNA is we're software people. And we've all worked for large companies before, and we're fortunate to have the resources to really have a huge amount of fun and just do the right thing. So inside Xero, we're really passionate about this. We're passionate about the ecosystem. We enjoy having partners. We want to partner well with people. We enjoy their success as well. And then what we're trying to do internally is drive ownership through all of our teams. So we have this wave of innovation. So when you start off doing accounting software, the first few years of it, building the core platform, it's a big monolithic block. But I think we're getting to that point, and internally we've gone through the massive changes over the last sort of 18 months or so, moving from that founding sort of centralized development model with a few kind of other regions to now fully distributed model. We've had technical debt we've had to sort of clean up, and some really big projects that we just had to get done behind the scenes. So I think we're in a pretty exciting position, and I think the key thing is kind of organizing our teams so we've got people with real ownership inside the business driving each of their threads forward. So we have the strategy of this wall of innovation, which we'll see that just accelerating really over the next couple of years.
Yeah, cool. So you talked about Intuit a little bit there. They've been doing some things in their ecosystem recently, which has been interesting. Do you want to see what we've been seeing there?
Yeah, so it's congratulations to InvitBox getting acquired. That's really great news for those guys. I think the main things we're seeing is Intuit as an incumbent without the luxury of being able to start again with a clean platform, and with they obviously see the threat of all this innovation and new companies coming into the space. They've really got to do R&D by acquisition, and so we're certainly seeing that it's actively part of their strategy. So that's awesome for the companies coming in the ecosystem, because there's a chance that you could get brought. I think, though, the downside of that is if you're doing sort of R&D by acquisition in the core platform, you end up with a bit of a Frankenstein. For the add-on community, you have to be really respectful about what you acquire and what you don't acquire. We've done 3 acquisitions to date, and they've been around much more the horizontal pieces that we really needed. So, payroll in Australia, we could have built that ourselves, or we had a really great partner that was on a modern platform. We needed to do payroll for the Australian market, so that made sense, and that's been a great acquisition, and the team's done really well. We acquired Workflow Max because we really wanted to provide practice management software, but we didn't want to compete with all of the other job costing. We think that job costing time recording is a really cool space, so why we haven't made it sort of Xero Workflow Max, and we've kept Workflow Max arm's length, is so that we respect the ecosystem. We want to see lots of investment and lots of choices in those time recording apps, and of course our Workflow Max team think that that's the best product, but we actually don't want to give them an unfair advantage. We'd much rather they compete, and we see lots of other time recording and job management applications, and we think they'll kind of verticalize anyway. And then we brought Spotlight Workpapers because that filled out a suite in our practice management tools, and we've been hardening that. So we've been, while we've done a few to fill out our product strategy, we've tried really deliberately not to compete too much with the channel, and I think that's the issue that Intuit will have, is that as a larger company, they probably see themselves as having all of the solutions, whereas we think we want to really focus on the core accounting and then see the ecosystem really take over, and our view is that open approach wins. And I think so you'd have to say now, why would you invest heavily in the Intuit ecosystem if they're going to pick one winner? We'd like to see it much more open. And the reality is that if you really do want to get acquired by Intuit, and I don't blame people for wanting to do that, being a really good Xero partner seems to be the best way to do that.
Totally. So Rod, in terms of if you're looking at different opportunities and that kind of thing, so we're going to stay horizontal. Is there any guidance you would give in terms of functionality that people should stay away from, though, or what any rule of thumb?
Yeah, well, I think quotes is a good example. So we've deliberately not prioritized quotes because we've had some really good quoting partners in the ecosystem, and so we've given them plenty of space, but we've signaled very early that's a space for us to go, so that's under development right now. But again, we want to do kind of the 80-20, and hopefully those guys, it's been signaled pretty clearly, they can do more advanced features, so it's worth people buying all of that extra stuff. So where we see, because our partners do talk to us, we do signal pretty clearly that that's something we'll do in time. So of our existing 300 add-ons, I don't see a huge amount of conflict. So within Bitbox being brought, do we buy a receipt bank? Well, not really. It's not an arms race. We think there's such cool stuff happening with OCR and all of those, and those guys have a great business on their own. We're kind of happy to sort of see all of that play out, and then a lot of the other apps are these verticals, which I think is really, really exciting. So in the horizontal space, we'd be pretty clear about, as partners come through, that that's something we'd probably get to, and then potentially there's an acquisition. But with the investments we've made in these teams, the marginal cost of us building a new application is relatively small compared to doing an acquisition. So mainly we see it kind of working with the ecosystem, and we just sort of see how things go. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I guess one of the things.
Yep.
Oh, I guess one of the things that strikes me is that because we're a global company and we've got, like markets that you can play in UK, Australia, US, and New Zealand, and of course our global market as well, is that we're actually seeing different people succeed in different markets. For example, Receipt Bank started out as a great partner in the UK, and they're now expanding into Australia. But because we have partners that are doing great in different markets, then it really doesn't make sense for us to try and kind of acquire one person and let that be the solution.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a few partners that have kind of hired developers to do stuff, and part of there is a acqui-hire component to these things as well. So if you do want to be acquired, you've kind of really got to have your team. But it's kind of interesting, actually. We've had a few, not that many staff leave and do their own thing. But before, to be an entrepreneur, you had to go and build your own company. What we're seeing actually is a lot of our staff have made more money being inside the tent with Xero, because being a public company, we have shares and all that sort of stuff. So being inside the mothership actually isn't a bad thing at all. And we just hope, well, we think we're going to continue to grow. So if there's any, I guess what I'm saying, if there's any teams that, find that they're struggling, we'd be more than happy to give them a home, and, there's plenty of apps to build. So don't even think you have to have ideas. If you want to get part of the ecosystem, we've got 10 years worth of projects we'd love to do. So careers, or give us an email.
Yeah. Speaking of careers, do you want to talk about your dev chops? So ASP Classic, you're a bit of an expert now?
Oh, I'm the best VB developer there's ever been, and I think we built probably like 300 Microsoft Access apps. And the very first version of Xero, before we did Xero, we wrote on the beta of ASP.NET 2.0, whatever that was, which was pretty cool. Master pages and all of that sort of stuff. It's quite cool, actually. I mean, one of the things, it wasn't just that you could build things on the web, but building a relational accounting system. And I think one of the coolest bits of work we did was I came back one day just after we started Xero, and Kirk and Craig had worked out this thing called a multi-perspective general ledger, where we could model, not just everything inside a journal so it balanced, but we modeled the cash and accrual legs. So we'd solve this fundamental problem of you doing cash or accrual-based accounting. We don't care. You just do your accounting, and we can pull it out. So we model both of those things. And then sometime later, probably I think it was about 18 months in, the guys came and said, look, we really need to do multi-currency. We're actually going to rebuild the engine. I was like, no, you can't do that. We need to get features out. But we actually had to go back and rebuild the engine and build currency right in, so we could do real-time mark-to-market on your unrealized gains and losses. So there's been getting that relational data model right is pretty exciting. And that's been relatively stable, even as we've scaled, and we're on about platform 5 at the moment. And then kind of what we're still doing, though, is building out those workflow features over the top, with quotes being the next one.
Cool. All right. So just one last question we'll take, and it's not really around API and ecosystem, but since they asked it, we may as well answer it. Somebody's asking about Stripe Xero development, option to push payments from Stripe to Xero, similar to the Xero integration. Any ETA on that? Yeah. So our team recently released a Square integration where you can pull in a sales summary invoice, and I think they're looking for a similar feature for that for Stripe. I don't think there's anything on the roadmap just yet on that one. It kind of works like a slightly different workflow, though, isn't it, Rod? Really, because we see Stripe as being what you would kind of surface on an online invoice to receive payment versus Square.
Yeah, I think a lot of people said, well, why don't you do a mobile payment app and all of that, like MYOB did? But all that does is add quite a lot of cost for those transactions. We actually, through the bank reconciliation, payments arrive through there anyway. So the cool thing about accounting software is, there's a lot of integrations that don't actually need integration, because the bank record is the integration point. But you've seen the work we're doing with the banks in New Zealand. We're creating a whole lot of new sort of bank-to-bank payment options for high-value payments. I think as we get through the accounting side, so we think we're probably a year away from finishing the horizontal accounting features. Certainly payments is a really interesting space, quite different around the world. New Zealand, Australia, and somewhat the UK have very active online banking projects, and we can move the needle inside there. In the US, you have this issue of this massive fragmented market which over time we'd really like to solve, and we're doing a bit of thinking around that at the moment. But we kind of see our space as the core general ledger, and then where the money flows is really interesting to us.
Cool, awesome. All right, so there's a few more questions coming in, but I think there are questions we can probably handle at the end on our normal question flow, and they're more around API development, stuff like that. So, hey, Rod, thanks very much for joining us. Anything else you want to leave? If you were starting a software company tomorrow, if we kicked you out the door of Xero and you had to go off and decided to build an add-on, where would you start?
High volume billing.
Yep. All right, you heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Rod. Awesome. Right, that's Rod giving us the big picture. Tony, back at the coalface, we've got some feature releases that we've shipped recently. Do you want to flick us through? Adam will drive that slide deck. Zip through a couple of pages.
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, we've been in our features that we've released over the last 4 weeks. So we've shipped four feature releases in the last 4 weeks. So just going back through a few of those highlights. So yesterday in our 2.53 release, we added the support for item codes on the bank transactions endpoint. So that was just a gap there that was available in the core Xero application. So if you're using item codes on invoices, you can now use them on the bank transactions as well. More importantly, in yesterday's release, we provided extensive improvements around attachments. So previous to that release, we supported attachments on invoices, so both on sales invoices and on bills, and also on draft receipts. But now we've gone back through a whole lot of the other documents in Xero, so we've now pretty much closed all the gaps. So bank transactions, you can attach files. So that means that you can attach up to 10 files per document, up to 3.5 megabytes in size. We pretty much support every file type there is. We also support attachments across contacts, manual journals. So I think we're pretty much addressing most of the main requests from developers around attachments. I'll talk a little bit about files further on, but yeah, for now that hopefully should fill those gaps. Another thing that we've released this week, which is really exciting, is some major improvements to the setup process. So this is a feature specifically aimed at developers that are building conversion tools from other accounting software. And so that's hugely important to us that whole process is really streamlined. So as of our 2.52 release on Wednesday, you can now bring in a replacement chart of accounts. You can set a conversion date. And the complicated process of bringing in all of your opening balances, so that's like a trial balance from your previous accounting system. But what we've done is we've even covered the scope of all of your outstanding invoices and credit notes. For those conversion parts before. So we've also got quite an extensive guide that steps developers through that process of what we recommend. So in the Developer Center, if you go into the guide section, you can see a full guide, what we recommend, how to do conversions. We're keen to hear any feedback from developers on further improvements we can make, so just let Ronan and his team know about that. And then just rounding off, contacts. So in recent releases, we've filled quite a lot of gaps with missing fields from contacts. But you've now also got the ability to archive contacts via the API. And just a reminder, in a previous release, there's an optional flag that you can use to retrieve any contacts that are being archived in Xero as well. So that's particularly useful if you're trying to sync your contacts with another system.
Cool.
All right, so then I noticed there was a comment in the thread before the Hangout, someone asking about 4 decimal place support. So yeah, we're committing to, by the end of June, having 4 decimal place support on the unit price field in Xero, and on the same day that will be available via the API. So this is really useful, particularly for partners that are working with items on invoices that involve inventory. So being able to specify a unit price with up to 4 decimal places, so that brings it on par with our quantity field, which is pretty much always supported 40p. So there will be some developer docs going out around that. It's not going to be a breaking change for developers, okay? So just want to be really clear on that. So at the moment, we automatically round any unit prices that have got more than 2 decimal places. We round them down, and so from this release, we'll still do that, but we'll provide an opt-in parameter a developer can provide when they send through an invoice, and then they'll be allowed to use up to 4 decimal places on that unit price. And just to be really clear on that same topic, so the overall line total, still 2 decimal places. The tax that's calculated, still 2 decimal places. It's just that precision on the unit price that quite a lot of our partners have been hanging out for a while, so it's really good to look to get that one out next month. Moving on to something a little bit different, so in terms of client libraries, we've got some really good third-party client libraries in the ecosystem, so really good ones in Rails, some good wrapper support in PHP. We've had our own .NET one for a while, but it'd be fair to say that we've had quite a lot of feedback from developers of ways that we could improve that. So we're taking a real hard look at that, and we've been doing some great work in terms of a next generation wrapper library. So you'd expect that to come out over the next month or two. And just leading on from that, one of the key gaps that we've had in our wrapper libraries to date is the support for the payroll API. So the payroll API out to a small number of developers that we're working through some feedback on at the moment. So you'd expect that to come into the scene over the next few months as well. So that's really exciting that we can now, now that we've got a really solid core API, we can now really start paying some attention to the wrapper libraries that sit on top of that API and make things even easier to integrate. Just rounding out another small thing that we're working on, a lot of people have asked to be able to get the online invoice URL via the API, so that's another improvement that will be coming soon as well. So then looking out a little bit further on the horizon, so in terms of remaining gaps in the API, we've been doing some great work just really backfilling in, putting the API on level with the rest of the application. So tracking categories is an obvious gap, so we'll be closing that one soon, so that will allow you to create new tracking categories and options. And then the other one is purchase orders. So we're just about to start work on that now, and we won't be too far off on releasing that functionality too. Then on to a slightly different area, so the Files API. So we've got great support for attachments now with the API, but we think there's some really exciting use cases around what we have in Xero is a files inbox. So every organisation has a files inbox where you have a unique email address where you can email files. So for example, invoices and the original source PDF docs into an inbox for the organisation. And we think there's some really exciting ways that if developers are able to access those and then generate the actual documents inside Xero, such as invoices and receipts, we think there would be some really good scenarios there. So we're looking to have a complete files API that will allow you to not only create the files that appear in that inbox, but also access those files in the inbox and convert them into other documents. And then the other thing, looking beyond that, is, yeah, as I mentioned before, our work on wrapper libraries. We really appreciate the effort that third-party devs have put into building wrapper libraries today, and we want to see how we can chip in and contribute and make all of those wrapper libraries and popular languages kind of like really first-class client libraries.
Cool. Thanks, Tony. All right, so I've got a few questions on some of those recent releases. I just want to zip through. Might help with then answer some questions other developers are thinking about.
Sure.
So, in terms of certainly in terms of the attachment support. So pretty much anything like PDFs. I think did I even see some video files on that list or something crazy?
Potentially, there is a huge list of file extensions we support. I think we've actually got a to-do there of putting all of those up on our developer center. So we'll try and get those up over the next few days, so developers are really clear on the doc types we support.
Yeah. So and so bank transactions. So that's the spend and receive monies in Xero itself on the bank rec screens, where you typically see that as well. That's cool. All right. So then, in terms of contacts, I know contacts is a little bit of a pain point in terms of applications syncing to and from Xero in terms of getting that right. So a couple of places that you can go wrong. Sometimes the contact is merged and sometimes it's archived. So the work we've done around retrieving archived contacts and now being able to archive contacts themselves, that's kind of almost there. And then the final thing we need to be working on is this idea of merging contacts.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're still aware there's a gap via the API of you might have multiple contacts that you want to merge together and just keep one of those. So it's pretty easy to do in the application, but you'll be looking to backfill that support via the API. Yeah. Can't give it a definite date, but it's definitely within our kind of short to medium term plans, maybe a few months out.
Cool. Now, on line items, because line items are used, spend and receive money, the bank transaction endpoint, invoices, credit notes, manual journals as well. They all behave the same in terms of line items.
I
think they pretty much
do across the board. Yeah.
So you've got your quantity, which we currently support 4 decimal places.
That's correct. Yeah.
And then you multiply that by your unit amount, which we're planning on putting in 4 decimal places for, and that calculates the line amount.
That's correct.
And then you've got your tax code and account code as well.
Yeah.
So it's just 4DP on quantity and 4DP on the line amount, and that gives you a 2 decimal place monetary figure. And then the other thing I think is discounts as well. So discounts, again, you specify a percentage, and that gives a 2 decimal place calculation as well. Yeah. Well, and yeah, so one of the questions around the .NET wrapper library that we also, so probably some people are using the current .NET wrapper library are wondering sort of how could we use the new one. So we, in addition to kind of releasing the first iteration, we're also going to be looking at how what the upgrade paths might be. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we'll try and do is reach out to a few developers that are using the current .NET library, get you guys on board as I guess some first beta testers to give us some kind of live feedback of how you see implementing those changes. And then we'll put together a real solid guide on migrating from that library to the new one.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Time for a bit of Q&A. Hey, is Riley about there? Well, we've got some questions and Riley's been feeding in. Hey, Riley.
Hey.
Yeah, we've got some good questions there, quite a variety. So Siva was asking about, hey Siva, by the way, Siva was asking about an asset register via the API. So I guess, Tony, in terms of where we're at with, so we have a fixed asset module within Xero at the moment, which you haven't opened up an API for.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of our overall product plans, we've had quite a bit of feedback, particularly in the Australian market, that there's some real improvements that we need to make in terms of fixed assets. So I think we've got a stream of work kicking off there pretty soon. So then, yeah, once that's underway, we'd really then start seriously considering opening that up via the API.
Yeah. So
a little bit to go before I think we'd look at opening that up, but it's definitely on the cards.
Cool. Yeah, so bottom line is until we release an improved fixed asset module, then we won't look at doing the API for it. Oh, sorry, a little bit to go yet, unfortunately, Siva. Now, a couple of questions on bulk. David is asking about a bulk journal endpoint. I think this is around the limitation of 100 journals at a time. Now, we looked at that, I know. I'm not sure if we actually managed
so we've opened that up. So, so if you look through our previous release notes, we removed the restriction. So I think there was a restriction of 100 line items on a journal. So we actually removed that restriction.
Yep. So you shouldn't be restricted. So the only restriction then is just in terms of the sheer size of posting just a massive journal.
Yeah.
So a couple of things to be aware of if you are posting anything in large quantities, that the maximum data will be able to receive is 3 megabytes. Now that's a lot of data. That's a lot of lines on it. Hopefully you're not sending 3 megabyte journals on a regular basis, unless you really need to. But we would always advise that you would kind of keep things as streamlined as possible in terms of what being able to sort of post across a journal. Obviously it's a little bit tricky sometimes because you might have lots of line items that are related to a specific kind of bulk transaction in another system.
Sure.
Yeah. Cool. All right, other questions we've got in. So there have been some questions around quotes and ETA on that. I guess that's without dodging the question. It's not an area that we're working on. So, but my understanding is that while there's a team lined up to work on it, we don't have any news in terms of an ETA yet. I think Jared was asking about the specific functionality that our quotes will have. I think we've talked generally about what that might have, but probably like we had earlier in the year, we had Tokes on the Hangout to talk about what the product priorities are for the main application. Is that once we've got some of these things that are kind of might be having an API impact in train and about to be built, and we've got a good feeling for the feature set, that we might then kind of maybe give you folks a quick walkthrough how that works. Awesome. So just a shout out to Heather Smith on the call. She had a couple of questions around. Well, I think Rod answered the question around specialized solutions we'll be seeing in the marketplace. But Tony, this is a question that you've got some good insights as well, because you preceded me in terms of working with our add-on partners around the average length of time it takes to go through the approval process for being a Xero add-on partner. I think it's it varies a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess in my time in the early days of the partner program, I think the shortest that we had to get certified was 1 week. That's running extremely quick. The guys had all their ducks lined up. Getting all the marketing requirements sort of sorted out. So, achievable aim. Ronan, what do you think over a kind of a 2-month time span? Is that kind of typical that you see these days?
Yeah. So by and large, a lot of the work is obviously on the partner themselves to do, and what we see quite often is that an integration with another application is a nice to have feature that they're chipping away at, but it's not a main feature that they're working on. And so we typically see is a partner might spend a day or two on it, and we might not hear from them for a month or 6 weeks or so. So I think the range, the last time I did some data on it, I think it was anywhere between 5 years and probably about 2 or 3 weeks in terms of the range of length of time it might take from initial contact to getting something into the add-on directory. But the average, Heather, I think is sitting at about 180. A little bit of a flavor of that. Typically, we were able to be quite responsive in terms of inquiries, and I know Sid in the US and Riley in Australia are doing a great job at the moment of being as responsive as possible. But as we're getting more attention, we are quite overwhelmed with inquiries just at the moment. Great news on that front, however, is that we have a member of the team joining us to help out in the UK and the rest of world region in just 2 weeks' time. So we got loads of work for James, our new team member, to do there. And I'm certainly looking after New Zealand at the moment. We're actually recruiting for somebody here as well. So as the requests come in and demand for the sort of partnerships come in, and we do our best to stay on top of that, so we're not a blocker. But from time to time, it can happen that we are. Yep. Cool. And then just finally, Alexander had a question around the setup and accounts endpoint. Is there a limit to the amount of accounts?
There isn't a limit to the set of the accounts, but it's probably something that would be keen to talk to with each of the conversion partners in terms of the size of the charts that they're looking to bring in. But it's consistent with what you can bring in the main Xero app via other import methods.
Cool. All right, so that's a question from now. Paul is an accountant rather than a developer, so but this should be straightforward enough. So Paul's asking if there's a unique contact identifier. So this is areas where you sort of say in a retail environment where you have 3 Tony rules that are customers. What can we do to have a unique identifier? Because at the moment, the actual name itself is the unique identifier.
So at the moment, there is a limitation in the feature set in Xero and context. So each name has to be unique. We do have a team reviewing that at the moment. So from a developer point of view, some options that you have would be to append some sort of prefix or something after the contact name. Developers also have and on any sort of improvements around context, because I know there's quite a few issues that have been raised on the main Xero community about improvements we could make, things like custom fields and that sort of stuff.
Cool, awesome. All right. So I think that's probably all we've got time for today. But I just want to say thank you for everybody for hanging out with us, for asking questions. Do remember that we're more than happy to answer questions as you go throughout the month anyway, until our next Hangout in June. So best place to do that is at community.xero.com/developer. But I also noticed that there's quite a few other questions around that are just in the Hangout itself around product improvements and things like that. And so if we haven't answered those questions directly on this Hangout, hi everybody. Sorry, we might have just lost you for a second there, but I think we're back up online again. Cool. So hey Roddy.
Hey.
So Roddy, just before we drop off, deliberately drop off this time, do you want to give us a quick update on Australia and events that are coming up in Australia?
Yeah, sure. So we've got Developer Day coming up at XeroCon. So it'll be the day before on the 20th of August, and it's a great opportunity to meet everyone in our ecosystem and put some faces to names. So there'll be add-on partners there. There'll be certified developers, cloud integrators. There'll be some accounting and bookkeeping partners, and of course there'll be heaps of Xero staff members there. Rod, Chris, Rid, and the rest of the API team will be there. We'll be reflecting on what's happened in the past year and what we have planned for the next year. And the keynote will be handled by Matt Barry, the founder of Freelancer.com. So that should be really exciting, having taken his company public this year, or sorry, last year. And the full schedule is going to be on the website in the next couple of days. Tickets for the Dev Day are $150, but you can also buy a package for Dev Day, XeroCon, and the Gala night if you're planning to attend the whole thing. And I think anyone who went last year will say it's a great opportunity to meet everyone in the team and really be a part of the ecosystem. So I hope to see everyone there.
Awesome. Thanks. Around the technical side of things, well. Other things, oh yeah, so that's going to be, so for by the time of our next Hangout, which is on June 19th, we'll definitely have all those details fleshed out. And if you're following us on Twitter at Xero API, or if you are on our developer mailing list, which you can get onto by just going to the Developer Center homepage, you'll definitely be getting an email around about Developer Day very shortly as well. As an add-on partner as well, just to remember that there are exhibitor opportunities at XeroCon itself. It's a massive event in Sydney. Accountants, bookkeepers, cloud integrators, members of the Xero sales team who are good people to know around.
Yep.
Even if you're just apologies if we did drop out there briefly at the end, and so we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks very much.